Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. Today we have another consent chat with my friend Bob. Bob, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Bob. I graduated from the same college, Harvey College, as Sarah. I'm 26 years old and a software developer in San Francisco. Go figure. I'm currently dating a lovely lady in New York who is starting her residency, so we're in a long-distance relationship. We consider ourselves monogamish at this point. We have other play partners, but we only have one primary romantic partner right now.
What messages do you feel like you received about consent while you were growing up?
I received very few explicit messages about consent and sexuality in general. I think sex ed was even pretty good at my school, talking about contraception and ways to protect yourself and stuff. But like, there's never really any messaging around like consent and sort of like talking about people's feelings and like the emotional part of sex.
Right.
I did not talk about sex with my parents, like, or relationships with my parents at all. Right? That's just not something that was part of our child-parent dialogue. But like even the few people that I had dated in high school, there was a lot of sort of like buying into the stereotypes about how men and women are supposed to approach relationships and stuff. And implicit in all of this was sort of like the way that like the man is supposed to be like the pursuer or whatever, and is supposed to like demand, sometimes aggressively, from the woman what he wants, right? And I certainly internalized this like somewhat, but like I definitely like played into it while I was in high school. There were like these sort of like confusing implicit messages, along with like my own awkward like teenager self, and like I don't know what girls' relationships, right? But also like I have to aggressively just like do things without asking her because it ruins the mood if I ask if I can kiss her or something. That kind of stuff certainly didn't help in high school. Even through college, I had a lot of people that I felt comfortable talking about these issues with, and definitely like one of the biggest growing points for me was when my college girlfriend and I opened up our relationships, and we realized we really have to like talk a lot about consent and like sort of like what's okay and stuff in order to make this relationship grow in that way. But like a lot of that was like new ground for me. Like talking about these sort of like consent things at all was new ground for me in college. So
how did you find yourself working through that?
After first bringing it up, it took us another 6 to 8 months or so before either of us slept with anyone outside the relationship. In particular, like one of the things I think that really helped was establishing both me and my girlfriend at the time had sort of like emergency safety valves, right? And that like we were sort of putting each other first in the relationship, and like our feelings wise consent or whatever about what our partner is doing has priority over whatever the partner might feel or want to do.
Oh, interesting.
Either me or my girlfriend at any point, for whatever or for no reason even, can say stop the openness of the relationship. So for example, if my girlfriend were to start dating someone else romantically, which she did, if I decided that I was uncomfortable with the situation at any point, I could say, this is making me uncomfortable, please stop. My feelings about uncomfortableness or whatever would have precedence over like whatever obligations she might have to her partner, who she is also the girlfriend of. It's what worked for us as far as like consent, which is kind of tricky because like anytime you bring someone else into the relationship, they're also a person, right? And like you want to be respectful of their wishes and stuff like that as well. But like especially for us, just because like for both of us, this is like very new ground and like very exploratory as far as like giving consent about like what we're okay for our partners to do with other people. It provided a good sense of security for both of us to know that we could pull the brakes at any point. We communicated that clearly to our outside partners.
Can you think of any times that you've had problems with consent that you'd like to share?
So one issue that has cropped up sometimes in the past for me is that once I'm in a relationship, I tend to assume that like consent is given unless the partner explicitly revokes it. I mean certainly if it's like, oh, I want to have sex, oh, not tonight, I'm not feeling great, that's totally fine. I'm certainly not going to like pressure anyone into sex if they don't want to. Least of all in a relationship, but like there are times when someone's maybe not feeling so much like wanting to have sex, but if they're not explicitly revoking it, sometimes I will not pay attention to like small nuances and things like that. There was a situation with a girl I was dating and we were long distance at the time, which has its own set of issues for sort of like learning each other's sort of like nuances in sort of like things like this, right? Like if you're sort of trying to watch out for like small cues about like how they feel about having sex or not, it's a lot easier to like learn these small things when you have like daily reinforcement. We were together at one point after a long period of being apart, and basically I had sex with her when she like didn't entirely want to. I was particularly desirous of sex that night. She sort of like hemmed and hawed a little bit, but like didn't explicitly say no. So I did try to press the issue a little bit, and she didn't say anything at the time. I mean, she came down with a harder no after I pressed a lot more, and we ended up not sleeping together that night. But afterwards, she told me that it really broke a lot of trust that she had in sort of feeling safe around me. I realized that it was an issue, and I felt very bad, but that ultimately, that was one of the factors leading to us breaking up. Yeah, I mean, just, we talk about like sort of like explicit consent all the time and stuff, but I think an interesting facet is like in relationships, I think few people are going to like sit down and be like, do you want to have sex right now? Sort of like so straightforwardly every single time with someone that you're in a long-standing relationship with. Yeah. I think it's important to like understand, it's not that you're not asking for consent, you still are, but just the response is given in a more nuanced or implicit way. And that's okay, because as long-term partners, you've been able to sort of like learn each other's nonverbal communication. And so the thing is, you're still asking for consent, you're just asking and receiving an answer in a perhaps nonverbal way.
Right. But it takes a while to learn that.
Exactly, yeah, it takes a while to learn that, and especially like for like long distance, it's like a lot harder just because like when you're texting each other, right? Like that's like purely purely textual conversation, right? Like you don't get to see all the nuances.
Have you found that there are different ways that consent works for you in different kinds of relationships?
Yeah, certainly. So, at least for me in open relationships and stuff, when I want to sleep with someone outside of my primary relationship, it's important that I also get consent from my primary partner as well. Because even while my primary partner is not involved in the physical acts of it, so like for me and my girlfriend right now, we have we've sort of had to hammer out sort of like the process about if one of us is going to go sleep with someone else. As far as like how much advance notice should I let you know that I'm going to go on a date with someone else? Do you want to like know if we ended up sleeping together or not? How much detail do you want to know, right? These sort of things.
So when you're in an open relationship and you are interested in an outside person, how do you go about starting that conversation with your primary partner? This
is certainly something that should be handled in advance in a sort of emotionally neutral moment, right? The day you're about to go on a date with someone outside of the relationship.
You already have tickets.
Exactly, yeah. It is generally not the best time to sort of bring about like, so I'm gonna do this, and this. Is that okay, right? But like, a lot of times it's just been as sort of as straightforward as we're lounging around on the couch like on an afternoon or whatever, and like, hey, like we've talked a little bit in the past about how we might want to see other people and stuff. I think we should maybe talk about logistics for that and sort of like what sort of advance notice do you want and things like that. I've talked about this like. Like on Saturday morning, like after we wake up and we're just like lying around in bed, right? But yeah, I think it's important just like that it's in sort of like an emotionally neutral situation.
All right, well thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much.
If you guys have any questions for Bob, you can leave them in the comments or email me and I will ask him if he wants to answer them. And if you like this video, give us that thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos from me, then hit that subscribe button. Happy consenting, folks, and I'll see you next week. So we're gonna do an interview now.
Okay.
Are you good? Do you wanna?
You wanna like put on your face or anything? That you're good.
I gotta push my glasses up. Yeah.
You're beautiful. Okay, cool.